Good morning and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Tuesday, August 30th at a couple of minutes after 10 a.m. and we are here for a special business meeting to conduct interviews for consultants to use in docket 2022-105E, which pertains to the 2023 Integrated Resource Plan of the South Carolina Public Service Authority, also known as Santee Cooper. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Appearing virtually, we have Commissioner Thomas and Commissioner Irvin, and present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner J. Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner C. Williams, Commissioner Caston, and Commissioner Belser. Executive Director Boyd, do you have anything to say as we get started?
No, ma'am. Representatives from the Brattle Group are available for their public interview this morning in docket number 2022-104E.
104 or 105?
I apologize, 105.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning to members from the Brattle Group. You are the Brattle Group Incorporated from Boston, Massachusetts is the first interview that we have this morning. And I believe we have John Tsoukalis and Metin Celebi. I hope I'm pronouncing names correctly. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Can you identify? Okay, now I see your name.
Good morning, commissioners.
Okay, I see. And Mr. Celebi, am I saying your name correctly?
Almost there. It's Celebi.
Celebi, okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Tsoukalis, am I pronouncing your name correctly?
You are.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, welcome, and we have received your response to the request for proposals. Would you like to open with any kind of statement for us?
Well, just to say that we're excited for this effort. We have, between our team, we have decades of experience modeling electric power systems and analyzing different resource portfolios, which is going to be the key skill set needed here to help you all work through the Santee Cooper IRP process. We're familiar with the power system in South Carolina and the broader Southeast, and we're looking forward to answering your questions this morning. I don't know, Metin, if you have anything to add to that?
No, thank you. That's a good introduction, and we look forward to the discussion here, and thank you for the opportunity to potentially assist you.
Thank you. Let's see what questions commissioners may have. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner C. Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Welcome this morning. I look forward to seeing you on the screen, but for the moment, I have to talk to myself. But we appreciate your being here, and I'm going to dive right in. Have you appeared before the Public Service Commission of South Carolina as a party or as a consultant, witness, or representative for a party? And if so, what party, where, and what docket?
Neither myself or John have appeared before this commission before as a testifying consultant or witness or representative.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to ask y'all if you can speak a little louder. I'm having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. If you could get closer to your microphone. And by the way, we do have a court reporter present that is transcribing this, just so you're aware.
Will do. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Something just changed on my screen. Have you ever been employed or retained as a consultant for the South Carolina Public Service Authority, aka Santee Cooper, for any of its affiliates? If so, when and where, and what were the terms and monetary amounts of the contract?
Yes, we were retained, and myself, a major part of that team, by an outside counsel for Santee Cooper about 4 years ago in litigation cases regarding the termination of the VC Summer nuclear plant project. So we were hired as independent consultants and testifying experts in those cases to review the resource planning and decisions made by Santee Cooper in its decision to participate in the project back in about more than 10 years ago, and then subsequent decisions to continue and eventually terminate the project. So we essentially reviewed the Santee Cooper's resource planning analyses, activities, replicated them, and evaluated whether they were reasonable or not. So that was the context of it. Unfortunately, it was a confidential retainment, and it wasn't publicly disclosed. We ended up not testifying because it was a settlement. So unfortunately, I'm not sure how much of the details, further details I can provide, but I'm open to any questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Chelaby. Would you differentiate whether the two of you who are providing answers participated in that process, or was that answer with regard to the Brattle Group overall?
For now, my responses are limited to participation by me and John individually, and when it applies, I'm happy to make them more general to the Brattle Group teams other than us. But so far, I've been limiting the answers to myself and John.
Understood. Thank you. And you may have said this and I missed it, but who specifically hired you in that regard?
Sure thing. This was the law firm Nelson Mullins on behalf of Santee Cooper.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And my next question, has the Brattle Group or any of your employees, associates, contractors, or partners ever been retained to represent, well, you answered this, Santee Cooper or investor-owned public utilities in South Carolina? So other investor-owned public utilities in South Carolina. If so, when, where, and what were the monetary amounts of the contracts?
Maybe John, you can answer that one.
Yeah, so we have been retained to work for Duke in its modeling effort to estimate the solar integration service charge. We were hired to be the independent reviewer of that process, so actually kind of a similar engagement to what we're talking about here. But in that proceeding, we were actually hired directly by Duke. They were required to hire someone by the commission in both North Carolina and South Carolina, I believe. That engagement, there were only one I've been involved in, or Metin and I have been involved in, but some of our colleagues have worked for Duke as well. I don't have the monetary amounts for the other engagements that our colleagues have been involved in, but the one that I was involved in was less than $100,000. I don't have the precise amount with me. I can find that if the commission would like, but it was between $50,000 and $100,000.
Personally, that's good enough for me, but I appreciate that estimate. And when you speak of Duke, was that Duke Energy South Carolina? Was it Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress, Duke overall?
Yeah, so we analyzed both Duke Progress and Duke Carolinas, but the ultimate entity that retained us, I believe, was the corporate entity. But we did work on both systems. They have to create the solar integration service charge for both of their sides of their company in the Carolinas, and we worked on both of them.
Okay, thank you. Do either of you or members of your immediate family, partners, or associates own bonds in Santee Cooper? And if so, whose names are on the bonds, and what's the value?
No, we don't.
No, I don't.
Thank you. Just doing our due diligence.
Understood.
Do you have any reason to believe that you and the Brattle Group overall cannot serve as fair, impartial, or independent consultant for this project?
No, there is no reason we cannot serve as a fair, impartial, or independent consultant because, as we mentioned earlier answers, we are hired as independent experts, either on a consulting or testifying basis by both utilities and also by stakeholders in opposition to utilities. I know this is not exactly what you're asking for, but let me give you an example. Recently, we have been working with solar power developers in opining on Duke Energy's carbon plan in North Carolina and reviewing their resource plan, their assumptions, and suggesting alternative ways they can do their new generation timing and decisions. So we try to be impartial and fair.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you or the Brattle Group have any ongoing business dealings with the parties in this docket? And if so, what are they? Do you have any ongoing business dealings with with parties in docket number 2022-105-E? And if so, what are they?
Commissioner, could I add to that question a little bit? Gentlemen, I'm sure you've probably looked at the website and at this docket, the information in there. And at this point, I think the only parties that may be listed might be the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff, which is a state agency charged with representing the public interest in South Carolina. And then the South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs is also listed in the docket, but they've not yet filed a petition to intervene, so we don't know if they'll be a party. I just wanted to give you an idea of the entities that I've thought about that might intervene in this docket. Some of those would be the electric cooperatives of any of the electric cooperatives in South Carolina. There are a number of them. I can't list them all. There's also Central Electric Cooperative, which distributes energy from Santee Cooper. And if you've done some work for them, you're probably aware of them. I anticipate a number of clean energy and environmental groups, and some of the ones that typically intervene in dockets before this commission are Carolina's Clean Energy Business Association, also known as SACEBA, the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy, the Sierra Club, the South Carolina Coastal Conservation League, Vote Solar. Individual solar companies have intervened in proceedings, and maybe even industrial customers or groups representing industrial customers, and potentially even interested customers. So when we're talking about parties to the docket, I think that we're referring to potential parties because very few have already, no one's intervened in the docket. So I just want, if you would kind of think globally when we use the word parties, maybe stakeholders, that's kind of what we're looking for, if you don't mind.
Sure
Thank
thing.
you. Thank you, Commissioner.
Let me try to answer the question in two parts based on the parties that are officially in the docket that we were able to see. We did a formal check, and we do not have any ongoing business or projects with those parties. With respect to the parties that additional parties that you mentioned, that will likely be part of the docket as parties and stakeholders. My personal knowledge, we are not working for those parties, but as I mentioned in my earlier answer, we are currently working with some solar generation developers in a proceeding regarding Duke Energy's carbon plan. I expect, although I don't know, some of those parties may also be part of this docket in South Carolina in the IRP. If so, then we would definitely disclose that when it comes to that. That's all I have at this point.
And I would just add to that, we have worked with some of those parties you've listed specifically as potential interveners in the past. So SEBA, for instance, I've worked with them before, but I don't have any current ongoing business dealings with any of them. And like Metin said, if at any point in time they approached us, or anyone who was an intervener in this case approached us to work, we would disclose that immediately to the commission. And if there was a conflict, or if you saw a conflict, we would, reject their business until this case was over. And similarly, that would hold for any of our colleagues. We have an internal conflict check process, so any of our colleagues that are approached to do work with them are required to file a conflict check. And if they're an intervener in this case, it would be flagged, and we'd have to, bring that to you. So while, as you pointed out, the potential intervener list is too long to really go through person by person here, but that's kind of our process to ensure that conflicts don't arise going forward. One other thing I would add very quickly to that is you may be aware of the electric market reform measures study committee. We are working for the study committee right now. I'm involved in that process to analyze different market reform options for South Carolina. So we are working for the study committee. And as in that role, part of the advisory board that we interact with on a regular basis as part of that initiative includes ORS, includes Central Electric, includes basically all the stakeholders you could imagine in South Carolina, but we are working for the study committee. So our actual engagement is with the study committee itself, not all those parties, but we do interact with those parties as part of that process.
Thank you for adding that. Is the Brattle Group currently in any negotiations to represent any of the parties before a Public Service Commission or the Public Utilities Commission? If so, what are they? And are you currently in any negotiations to represent any of the parties from docket 2022-105E? And if so, what are they? That's what no, that is not what I just asked. I'm sorry. So are you currently in any negotiations? That's really the difference there.
Yeah, no, we are not, to my knowledge.
And again, if any of our colleagues are, they would have to go through that formal conflict check process so we can elevate that.
I appreciate your sharing that. Do you hold any licenses, degrees, designations, or credentials that qualify you as an expert in this field, electric utility matters? If so, when and where did you earn these credentials? And have you lost or had any of these certifications through recensions? And I guess I'm asking you personally because y'all are on the line.
Okay, let me start. I have a PhD in economics from 2000, year 2000, many years ago, and a master's degree in economics as well. Prior to that, and Bachelor of Science degree in Industrial Engineering Operations Research. And I have been working as an economic consulting and testifying expert for more than 20 years. John?
Yeah, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Washington and Lee University, which I earned in 2006. And I have master's degrees in economic analysis, which I earned in 2010 and 2012 from the Barcelona Graduate School of Economics. And I've been working as a economic consultant for more than 10 years now at the Brattle Group. in that time have testified in front of FERC, as well as Canadian regulators on matters related to wholesale power markets. To answer the last part of the question, I have not lost or rescinded any, or have had any credentials rescinded. I think that's the same for Metin too. He just forgot to ask that.
Yes, the same thing. Thanks for reminding.
Thank you. Are you a member of any utility-related trade groups or organizations? If so, what are they? And what's the mission of these groups or organizations? Are they for-profit? Are they nonprofit? And how might they relate to this particular work that we are considering entering into with you?
I am not, but relatedly, I'm a member of American Bar Association, and I'm planning to be a member of the Energy Bar Association as well. Obviously, they do utility-related work, energy-related work, but I'm not a member of any other utility industry trade groups or organizations.
I am also not a member of any trade groups or organizations.
Thank you, and thank you for your endurance. I feel like, you know, we're going through a checklist and listening intently, and appreciate your focus on this as well. Can you provide a final written proof of conflicts check from your firm? You've talked about your process.
Yes, so we did go through a conflict check process when we submitted our proposal, and we're happy to provide written proof of that. We would need to work with our legal team to do that, and if we can go ahead and submit that after this call, if you'd like.
I know we will want to see that, and I think after this call would be appropriate. So please do submit that.
Okay, we will go ahead and do that.
I believe there's a date that's
Okay.
set in the schedule for a final written conflicts check, and we'll make sure you have that.
Thank you. If you're hired if the Brattle team is hired as a consultant, are you willing to abstain from unauthorized ex parte contact with current or future parties in this docket?
Yes, we're happy to do that.
Are you aware of any reason that you or the Brattle Group should not serve as an independent expert in this docket?
No, we are not aware of any reason. Like I said, we provide this kind of expert analysis and expert opinion in these types of cases all the time.
Now, to me, more for a fun question. What's your schedule for the project completion?
So that is something we're happy to work with the commission on. We think the kind of modeling work will take to confirm all of the work that Santee Cooper does in this IRP process will take a few months, but we're happy to basically be flexible on that and amend as the commission and commission staff requires. So in some ways, that I think part of the engagement will be an initial conversation with PSC staff to figure out what is their optimal schedule, and we can be flexible to that. You know, like I said, provided that we'll need a couple months to do the right modeling and stuff like that. Does that answer your question?
Yes. What are the estimated hours associated with each task and the total labor hours?
Yeah, so we provided in our proposal a estimate of cost by task, and the breakdown of the hours will vary depending on kind of which staff works on each task, but I think somewhere between 800 and 1,200 hours of our time or our staff's time will be required to implement the work we talk about in our proposal. And I think most of that is likely going to be in kind of the modeling tasks, that are related to kind of replicating what, basically reviewing the results and replicating what Santee Cooper has done in its IRP process. That would be the most time-consuming part of the task.
And some of this is to get this orally on the record. What are your estimated total cost?
So we provide a total cost estimate of around $400,000 for the work laid out in this engagement.
And relative to South Carolina Code, Section 58-37-40, what information does the commission need to receive from your firm?
Yeah, we saw this question on the provided, and we reviewed that section of the code, and I don't see if there's anything in there that would be required that we submit. But it's possible that we might be missing something in our review of that. But from our kind of the review we conducted, we don't see anything that you would have to get from us.
Okay. Next, do you or your firm contribute to any political action committees? And if so, please identify them.
Our firm does not, and I personally have not. I think that's the same for Metin, but he can answer.
Same for me.
Thank you. Is there anyone who currently works for the Brattle Group who worked for a public utility or for Santee Cooper in the past? And if so, identify them. That may be too broad of a question depending on the size of the Brattle Group, but give it a shot.
Yeah, so nobody in our organization has previously worked for Santee Cooper, but we did want to clarify what you meant by public utility. Do you mean any investor-owned utility or publicly owned, meaning a state-owned or municipally owned utility like Santee Cooper? Or all of the above?
I think all of the above, given the focus of this.
Yeah, so we do have some staff that have worked previously for electric utilities in the industry, as you would imagine. Our electricity practice has about 100 or so consultants, and there are a couple of them that have worked for utilities in the past. We have an associate who worked for Consolidated Edison in New York prior to working at the Brattle Group. We have a associate who worked for Commonwealth Edison or Exelon, which is the parent company of Commonwealth Edison in Chicago. And there are a couple others that have worked for utilities in the Midwest and the Northeast. None in South Carolina and none in the broader Southeast that I'm aware of.
Thank you for that's helpful and enlightening, and I would certainly expect that experience, but good to know from whence it comes. Is there anyone who worked in the past for the Brattle Group who currently works for a public utility or for Santee Cooper?
Yes, so not for Santee Cooper, so kind of the same answer. There is nobody who used to work at the Brattle Group that now works at Santee Cooper that I'm aware of, or that we're aware of. But there are some former Brattle employees that now work at utilities. There's one who works at American Electric Power, which is the utility in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and also parts of Texas and Oklahoma. There is a former employee that works for Pepco in the Washington, D.C. area. And there are, I'm sure, others if you go further back in history, just given our work in the electric industry, we have several former employees that leave to go do those types of things. But to my knowledge, none at Santee Cooper currently, and none at the other utilities in South Carolina or, like I said, the broader Southeast.
And to broaden that a little bit further, what about any other kind of affiliations, just to make sure we've checked any possibilities?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Given our history, Brattle's been around now for more than 30 years doing electricity work. I think it's safe to say there are former Brattle people in almost any kind of, company in the electricity space. So I know of just in the last few years, we have former Brattle people who work for renewable developers, some of which might be active in the Southeast, for battery storage operators. Some folks have gone on to work in public policy, so at certain types of policy shops, including potentially some environmental, kind of advocacy firms. So I think it's safe to say if you have in mind any certain type of company, there's someone who used to work at the Brattle Group that's there. But I would say obviously once they leave the company, we sever all kind of ties with them from a professional standpoint, obviously not personal, but from a professional standpoint. And so they no longer, we don't see that as a conflict per se.
Is there anything that you wish that I had asked you in this realm of questioning? Because I'm about to yield the microphone to my colleagues.
I can't think of anything. The one thing, like I said, that I did wanted to just make sure we raised during this line of questioning is our current involvement in the electricity market reform measures work for the study committee of legislators. I wanted to just make sure that was on the record and that you all are aware that we're doing that work. But nothing else that I wanted to make sure was raised. Metin, do you have anything?
No, I don't.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners? Commissioner Caston.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Bear with me just a moment. I was actually just trying to do some math, looking at the hourly, estimated hourly rates, looking at the total and thinking about your response to Commissioner Carolee Williams' question on the total estimated cost. And I think I heard you say between 800 and 1,200 hours estimated. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
Because if I think I figured like $500, say if it was $500 per hour, that'd be about 800 hours. So I'm assuming there will be others working on this other than that $500 an hour guy, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The hourly rate sheet that I imagine you're looking at from our proposal, you could see the kind of top line of that are principals. So Metin and myself fit into that category, but we will have staff working with us, staff on our modeling team that will do a lot of the modeling work, and those folks will bill more in the $250 range to $300 range, something like that. So there will be a share of hours. That's why we kind of provide that range. If Metin and I did all this ourselves, it'd be closer to the 800-hour range. But what will happen is we will get support from our staff that bill at a lower rate, and which allows us to spend more time on the engagement.
And I think
if I can supplement, I would expect somewhere in the middle, about 1,000 hours from the team for this effort.
Okay, thank you. I think you either addressed this or gave an answer relative to how many folks you have working in the firm. What was that number again, roughly?
Well, so the Brattle Group as a whole worldwide has something around 500 employees. But the number I said earlier is our electricity practice, which focuses on the electric power industry, has closer to 100, and actually maybe a little bit even less than that, more like 65, 70, something like that.
65 or 70?
Yeah. But I anticipate that the project team for this engagement will be more like 4 or 5 people. So it'll be, a smaller team dedicated to just this effort.
And both of you are trained in economics. Is that correct?
That's correct. Economics and on my end, engineering as well.
Yeah, just economics on my end.
Amongst that 4 or 5, whomever would be working on it, what mix of backgrounds, expertise do you feel like is best utilized for an integrated resource plan?
Yeah, great question. So the team will almost certainly have folks who have electrical engineering backgrounds, because that is one of the skill sets that helps us with kind of power system modeling. So our modeling team has several electrical engineers or folks who are formally trained in electrical engineering. And then from that, there'll also be a mix of folks who have degrees in various things, economics, mathematics, statistics, depending on, which staff gets ended up placed on this work. But I think for sure there'll be someone who has electrical engineering background to help with the modeling work. And then I would say a range of skills from there. But more so than the formal training, I think the most important kind of skill set here is having done this type of work before. So having done power system modeling, capacity expansion modeling, asset evaluation, being able to evaluate, which types of assets that make up a potential resource portfolio, what kind of value do they provide for customers, what kind of reliability, et cetera. So that type of skill set is not really something that you would learn in formal training, but more comes from experience having done this work before.
And speaking of that, could you, I guess, briefly discuss your firm's or your individual prior integrated resource planning experience?
Maybe I can take a first crack at that. As I mentioned briefly, initially during this conversation, we are currently working in the proceeding in North Carolina regarding the Duke Energy's carbon plan. And our team has been reviewing Duke's carbon plan, which is essentially a resource plan or IRP, to meet the CO2 emission reductions and reliability requirements in their service territory. And we have done our own modeling, resource planning, capacity expansion, and production cost simulation modeling to replicate what they have done and evaluated some assumptions that we do not agree with or find reasonable, and do some additional analyses to understand the impacts of changing those assumptions and changing those resource portfolios for the system cost and emissions, etc. So this is one of the most recent related experience that I could mention. Prior to that, we have worked with various utilities or stakeholders in responding to utilities resource plans to evaluate the reasonableness of their assumptions in their resource plans, develop some alternative pathways that the utilities could consider. And specifically, in many instances, we evaluated the prudency of decisions to invest in the past on certain technologies and power plant types, and whether it makes sense economically to retire them under the current and expected market fundamentals. And I just want to mention one more example. We have quite a few. Some years ago, a Brattle team, including myself, did the Connecticut's annual integrated resource plan. It was a much larger team than what John mentioned as would be likely necessary for this engagement. It was a bigger team. We did the resource planning, simulations, all the filings that are necessary, and supported the regulatory proceedings and explained the findings to the stakeholders. So those are just a few examples I can mention.
I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Is it pronounced Celebi, Chelebi, or what's the correct pronunciation again?
Thanks for checking. It is Chelebi.
Celebi.
Chelebi. Yes.
Chelebi. Good, thank you. And if I could ask you, Mr. Chelebi, to speak just a little more into the microphone or whatever. I want to hear every word you say.
Okay, will do. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's quite all right. Relative to the North Carolina work you were talking about, are you performing this work, did you say, for the Duke companies or for?
It is, I'm sorry, go ahead. Please finish.
No, I just kind of make sure I understand. Who are you performing that work for?
It is for a group of solar and renewable energy developers called CPSA. I think it is a long name is Clean Power Supplier Association, including Cypress Creek and two other companies. So it is in a proceeding involving Duke Energy and other stakeholders. So we are just evaluating and reviewing the Duke Energy's analyses and filings and providing sensitivity analyses of that.
So performing that, I guess, for some interveners in that particular.
That's
okay.
correct.
Okay, got it. And did I understand you to say that one of the tasks of this is to try to, or you're attempting to replicate the company's model or outcomes? Is that what I understood you to say?
Yes, it is essentially to use their assumptions in their analyses to replicate at different levels of granularity what they are finding, to check whether we agree with the inputs that they use result in the outputs that they come up with, and then we did some additional sensitivity analysis on what if we change some of those assumptions and resource portfolio options considered in their modeling to evaluate the cost impacts for the customers in Carolinas.
Okay, so from the modeling perspective, does your team attempt to use the information supplied from the company to replicate, or do you have your own experience that you use inputs to try to see if you're in the same ballpark? I mean, some models are better than others. Some methods are better than others. Answer the first part of that question. How do
Yes, will do. We essentially do both. we have access to public information about the inputs that go into these kinds of models, including existing generation fleet characteristics, the fuel price forecast, the load forecast, etc., and the cost of new generation technologies, among others. So we already have those in our models, have those inputs already populated in our models from recent engagements. And then we also get the information from the filing utility about what they used in their model. So we can incorporate their inputs into our model to essentially check if the results that they are getting can be replicated. But then we have a critical review of their assumptions, and if we don't agree with some of them, then we do sensitivity analyses. Did I answer the first part?
Okay, so what I think I heard the answer is that possibly a little both. You use their information, but at the same time you use the company's expertise, background, experience to, I guess, just try to verify if things are in the realm of reasonableness, so to speak. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. From our earlier experience and our knowledge of industry kind of publications and outlooks, we compare the company's assumptions against those benchmarks to see if they are within a reasonable range or not.
And if I understood all this correctly, also the Brattle Group uses their own model and personnel in-house.
That is correct.
And is this a Brattle developed model? Is it a tried and true?
Yes. Should I go ahead and answer?
So this is a proprietary model that the Brattle Group has developed?
That is correct. This model that we call GridSem is an in-house model that we have developed. It's an optimization model of choosing the optimal mix of new resources, optimal mix of and timing of retirements, and the dispatch of generation and other resources to meet the projected load. And we have used that model in many proceedings and client engagements so far, including the most recent one that I mentioned in evaluating and replicating Duke Energy's carbon plan, which uses Encompass as the modeling software. So we are very familiar with Encompass structure, inputs and outputs and data sets. So we have done that kind of review in multiple instances before.
Okay, I think this is my last question, but summing all that up, all that we just talked about, does the Brattle Group have the ability to review what Santee Cooper has done with respect to assumptions, methodology, and/or modeling, and render an opinion if the work was performed correctly?
Yes, we certainly do.
And one thing I would add to that is, if necessary, part of what we think would be helpful in this engagement is also to, after we do that independent review of their assumptions, is asking them to rerun their model with updated assumptions that we can recommend. So we don't think, of this engagement as kind of being in a vacuum. They will give us their assumptions. We'll conduct an independent review, and if the commission would, deems it appropriate, we would ask them to rerun things with the assumptions we've changed and see how that changes their analysis. That way we have kind of our own independent replications with our model and our modeling team, but we also can see how those assumption changes would affect, Santee Cooper's own modeling as well.
Thank you. That was actually a question I was thinking about asking you, but you answered it before I asked it, so I appreciate that.
And let me supplement what John nicely summarized what we will do. So our modeling of the sensitivities could provide a great tool for evaluating the materiality and importance of some potential disagreements on the certain assumptions. And after doing that, the commission and the staff may decide to ask which ones of those sensitivities you would ask the Santee Cooper to evaluate with their own modeling as a sensitivity. So it could be used as a screening tool essentially for separating material differences in opinion from less important or less impactful ones.
Thank you. And this will be my final question. As far as the schedule, and I know Commissioner Williams touched on that, does the Brattle group see any issues or have any issues, concerns relative to schedule, starting, working, finishing this particular project?
No, we don't have any concerns about the schedule. Like, as I said earlier, to properly do this, we would need a few months to do the right review of their independent review of their assumptions, as well as our own modeling. But as long as we have that window of time, there's no other issues with the schedule that we can see.
Could you be a little more specific? What is a few months in your view?
I would say we would need probably 3 months or so to do this from start to finish. Metin, you tell me if you think something different than that.
Yeah, this is for the initial review and replication and identifying some key sensitivities. That will be about 3 months.
So you're saying 3 months at a minimum?
I wouldn't call it as a minimum. I would say expected. I don't know what, John, what is your sense?
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't say minimum. I would say that's our expected timeline.
Okay. So, excuse me while I do a little math. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure, okay, if you're using 4 to 5 people and you're talking about 800, 1,200 hours, if it's 1,200 and using 5 people, that'd be about 240 man hours per person. Is that correct? Am I figuring that right?
I don't think it would be, every hour that they spent on this. So I think, what probably Metin and I would, because we are leading the project team, would spend probably less than our full time on it, but there would be modeling folks who were spending their entire time on it. So I think, if we think about 1,000 to 1,200 hours total over a 3-month period, that's about 100 hours a week. Is that what you're getting at, Commissioner?
Yes, sir. I'm just trying to. I'm just trying to think from a practical point of view. If I were you and I had to do this, does this make sense? Do the hours add up, and can it be done?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that's right. So about 100 hours a week of person hours or staff hours devoted to this seems right. And as we said before, a large share of that would be our staff under our guidance doing the modeling work. So probably the majority of that 100 hours, 60 to 80 or so, would be modeling folks working on replicating Santee Cooper's work, verifying their assumptions against what we have from the industry, preparing, results deliverables from that work, so that we can present it to you all, and also engage with Santee Cooper to show them what we're seeing and asking them to do sensitivities. So that type of work, I think that feels about right. Your kind of estimate of about 100 hours a week for 12 weeks or so seems about right.
Okay, that 4 or 5 people team you're talking about, just say it's 5, that's about 20 hours per person a week. But that team that I'm assuming you guys have in mind that you're going to assemble, should you be awarded this, about how many years experience does that team have? I mean, are they fresh out of college? They've been doing this 20 years apiece, or?
Yeah, great question. So there'll be a mix of that. So you were looking at our kind of billing sheet before. The folks who are at the bottom of that billing sheet are people who will be, 2 to 3 years out of college, and have been spending 2 to 3 years doing this kind of modeling work, but are kind of our analyst core. So I suspect there would be 1 or 2 people from that analyst core doing the modeling work and data work, and then probably one associate or 2. So someone who's a little bit higher up on that seniority ladder has been doing this probably 5 to 10 years, has been doing modeling work for that period of time, would be also involved, and then Metin and I, who, as we've talked about, have each more than a decade of experience doing this. So it would be arranged. The team would be a mix, and I think part of that is to as we talked about, to have folks who can be totally dedicated to it would be kind of the junior staff, and they have hands-on modeling experience over the last several years. And then Metin and I would be kind of supervising the team, helping them develop assumptions and scenarios, things like that.
All right, so if I heard all that right, as far as the I guess the lesser experience, but still qualified, I'm assuming. You're talking about probably 1 to 2 people, I think you said, or and they would be pretty much inputting the data, gathering the data and such, and maybe inputting it in the model and running the model.
Yeah, that's right. You can think of them as kind of doing the data work and kind of pressing the buttons on the model, if you want to think of it that way. And then someone who's more experienced, myself or Metin, and the associate on the project would be, help understand, interpreting the results, helping them debug and see, making sure the model's running correctly, and kind of applying our experience to what comes out of the model. And also, if there are special modeling needs that need to be developed and require kind of some higher level conceptualization, that's where we would come in as well.
So that would be the 1 to 2 people at the associate level that'll do that, and then you two at a higher level. Is that kind of where the 4 or 5 coming from? Am I understanding that?
That's right. Yeah. So I would say that's right. It would be 1, 2 kind of analysts, or 1 to 2 associates, and then Metin and myself, and together we'd have something around 4 or 5 folks on the team.
Good enough. I appreciate it. That was it. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you. And good morning to both of you. You've talked about your team and how this team will be made up, and a good part of this, or some of it, once you get to the nuts and bolts of the actual hearing and preparation, you'll have to read pleadings, discovery, pre-file testimony. You may be required to answer requests, and the one part of that I didn't hear is there in-house counsel or an attorney on your team who will be responsible for that sort of stuff, as far as what we call the legal part of the pleadings, et cetera?
Yeah, so Metin and I have both served as expert witnesses before and provided testimony. So that would mostly fall on the two of us to provide that kind of review of testimony, data requests, pleadings, things of that nature. We would not have counsel, someone who's a trained attorney on our team. But if we needed to interface with someone like that, we do have a legal team at Brattle we could call on to help. But I think most of that kind of stuff you're describing, if not all of it, Metin and I have done all that in our experience as expert witnesses. So
you feel you have the experience when it comes to, let's say, responding to discovery, being deposed, testifying?
Yeah.
That is correct. We routinely work with attorneys, and we have provided those services and experience to our clients before, including, as you said, depositions, discovery, responding to discovery, and also drafting discovery questions, and testifying in person, and obviously written testimony beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And as far as your in-house attorneys, have any of the attorneys been disbarred or been disciplined in any way that you're aware of?
No, not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay. And you, as you know, you'll be providing us with some sort of written report at some point, which I think it said in some of the questions I've seen about a clear written report that I know you're experts in certain fields. Are you going to be able to make that report where we can understand it?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the key skill sets of an expert witness. In our roles as witnesses, we are, typically in front of either juries or folks who are not technical experts in the field, and so part of the skill set of an expert witness is being able to take what's a technical analysis and explaining it in a way that everybody could understand. So we feel fairly well versed in that, and feel confident we could do that.
What will be your procedure as far as listening to and analyzing the testimony? Will this all be done virtually by you?
Yeah, I would say a mix between us. We could do some of it in person if there's value added to that, but if not, we would listen virtually, and then also ex post look at the kind of written transcripts and written materials submitted.
Thank you very much. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Other commissioners? Commissioner Jay Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. Just a couple of high-level questions for you. What's your familiarity with South Carolina's energy past?
So as I said, we're working in for the study committee on the electricity markets reform measures. And so I think we, as part of that process, have become quite familiar with South Carolina's power system and kind of the recent history of what's going on in the state.
Okay.
Let me supplement that. This is Metin. Based on our work with attorneys representing Santee Cooper in the Cook litigation and other litigation, we also became very familiar with the outlook and the situation of Santee Cooper system from two decades ago to now, essentially. So we are quite familiar.
Understood. One of the reasons I asked that question is that I'm always interested in ensuring that all stakeholders in any matter that appears before the PSC can clearly understand the issues that the commission is charged with deciding, and also fully understanding the positions of the parties that appear before us. And I know my colleague, the vice chair, asked about being able to communicate the information in an easy to understand manner for the commission, but what about for Jack and Jill ratepayer?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, again, the part of what we've done in these kind of stakeholder engagements in the past is, so both of us have led kind of stakeholder engagement processes before, and so part of that skill set is right, being able to distill down the technical analysis into something that is understood by everybody in the room, regardless of their background. So yeah, we feel confident we can do that from our past experience.
Okay, great. That sounds wonderful. How good at dealing with conflict are, well, I guess your entire organization, specifically you two, but how good are you at dealing with conflict?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and a lot of the stakeholder processes do, in some way, basically end up being kind of conflict management or consensus seeking, if you want to think of it that way. What I think about this particular engagement is nice is we have a very clear mandate to be kind of the independent reviewer of Santee Cooper's work. So in some ways, we can bring stakeholders together and talk to them and get input from everybody, because as you said, there will be lots of interveners in this process. But we also are armed with the mission of, influenced by everybody. And I think that's helpful in these stakeholder engagements, to be able to listen to everybody, but then at the end of the day, we're charged with, using our expertise to say, this is the approach we would use, and this is how we would do things. And I think that's helpful to manage kind of conflict resolution in these types of settings.
And in our experience, for dealing with the conflicts and coming to a common understanding, it really helps to leave the egos to the side and just focus on the facts of the case and just agree on those as the starting point. Then a good foundation will be there for further conversations.
Understood. You've talked a lot about your firm, and I've listened, but I would like to give you the opportunity to maybe just make a general statement or elevator pitch, if you will. What is it about your firm that stands out from the competitors that you think makes you the best candidate for this opportunity?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is kind of there's been a lot of different skill sets and experiences talked about here today. Modeling, stakeholdering and stakeholder engagement, providing an expert opinion, dealing with the kind of litigation related side of expert opinions. And I think that's what our firm is good at and known for, is we can do all of those things at a high level. There are some folks who are kind of modeling shops and do a lot of modeling, but when it comes to the litigation side of things, they don't have quite as much experience, or dealing with stakeholders, they don't have quite as much experience. What Brattle is good at and known for in the industry is that we do all of that and do all of that well. So it's kind of both a breadth and depth of experience that can be brought to bear. And I don't know if you have anything else to add on to that.
Well said. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners, any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Irvin?
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen. It's good to have you with us and hear from you today. Wondering, were you aware that this is the first time that Santee Cooper will be coming to the Public Service Commission to file an integrated resources plan?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Commissioner.
Yep.
Yes.
And so I'm just wondering, when you were talking with Commissioner Caston about your time frame, because it is the first time through the process, do you anticipate it might take a little longer, perhaps, to work through this, given the fact that they've not been through it before?
Yeah, I anticipate that would be the case for both, PSC staff as well as commissioners, and I think also for some of the interveners that are very focused on Santee Cooper, that don't have experience intervening in other processes. So yeah, I think that's in my mind. I think that's part of why we're here, right? And why a consultant is being called in is to help that with that process.
And so that leads me to my next question. Do you think that your work with the South Carolina Legislative Committee, this looking at the big picture in South Carolina, do you think that that makes you better qualified or uniquely qualified to come in and with that knowledge and understanding?
Yeah, certainly. I do think it will be helpful in that we already know a lot of the names and faces because we've worked with them as part of the advisory board for that effort. And I think that will be helpful. Also the previous question about conflict resolution, it's much, it's helpful in those kind of stakeholder settings when you already know the person and you already have a relationship with them. So I think that does add to our qualifications here. And in fact, it's one of the reasons when we saw the RFP, we thought this would be a good fit for our firm, is that we're on the ground there already now doing some of that work. And, we know, like I said, a lot of the players in the room already. But in addition to that, from just a technical expertise standpoint, we're learning a lot about South Carolina's power system, what the issues are for the main utilities and some of the folks who will potentially be interveners. So I think we've got a good, lay of the land, a good read on that already, which is good.
And there's, I guess you could gain some local knowledge because you're already working with Duke in North Carolina. You've previously worked with Santee Cooper in South Carolina. So is it fair to say there's certain kinds of factual background knowledge that would also uniquely qualify you for this particular integrated resource plan study?
I would say definitely yes. Our prior work in South Carolina and North Carolina, many of them recent, I think prepares us for what is feasible, what is not in terms of resource options, what are the key constraints to be aware of in thinking about what can be done in the future, the role of Santee Cooper not only to be a cost minimizing utility but also to help with the economic development in the region. All sorts of all these information and the experience we gained, I think, will help providing a great service for you.
Yeah, and one thing we've heard about, past is, for example, the Transco Zone 5 natural gas line is which comes through the Carolinas is kind of maxed out, so to speak, in terms of its ability to deliver more natural gas. Is that something that you're aware of and know about, that history?
Yeah, and actually this has come up in our work for the study committee. It does seem that there is some limitations on getting new gas or more gas into South Carolina. So just from reviewing kind of where the IRP process is right now with Santee Cooper, I think you're hitting on a big question I have in my mind that I would like to ask the Santee Cooper team is, how do you, if we're going to replace some of this coal that's retiring with gas, how are you going to get gas for that? And they're going to need to show that as part of the planning process, some proof or demonstration that you could supply these resources with gas, particularly during times of peak consumption, right? What we've seen recently with events in Texas and other parts of the country is that gas supply is now a huge issue when it comes to reliability on the electric side. Sometimes you have units that are ready to go, but they can't get gas. So either, the utility has to have either dual fuel capabilities so they can run it off of oil in those kind of tight conditions, or needs to have some other kind of firm delivery, maybe two ways to get gas to the plant or something like that. And given the kind of the tight gas network in South Carolina, that's definitely a high high thing on my mind. Just reading through the IRP materials, that was one of the things that came to mind for me.
That's certainly a overriding concern because you know, if a utility is talking about building new gas peaker generation, that we have to know there's going to be a supply source for that plant. I'm wondering, that brings me to my next question. How soon do you think it's reasonable to consider storage as part of an IRP? And I guess what I'm getting at is the technology far enough along that it's proven, reliable, and affordable to include energy storage as a part of the integrated resources plan, or are we not there yet?
I think experience around the country suggests that we are there. You know, there's been several utilities across in the Southeast even that are considering it as part of their resource plan. So even folks that are close to Santee Cooper and have similar kind of resource mix and similar resource situation. So certainly it should be considered at this point in time. I do think there are questions about long duration storage and questions related to what, you know, battery storage can and cannot do. So it might help you, you know, for a few hours, but it's not going to help you in a situation where, you know, you need power for a 12-hour period because some of your other resources are down or your gas supply is not coming through. So it should be considered just like any other resource. It has limitations, and those limitations need to be considered in that plan as well. So it really depends on what Santee Cooper's need is. If the need is for long duration reliability, maybe storage in its current form is not the best choice. But if the need is more for you know, ramping during peak hours or some overnight periods when other renewables aren't available, then storage can be a great asset to do those types of things.
There's been some overriding concern too about if just hypothetically speaking, if an investor-owned utility builds a number of new gas-fired generation plants, what about the concern of stranded assets? Is that something you model for? Do you consider the useful life of the facility versus running the risk of stranded assets that ratepayers will have to pay for even long after they're retired?
It is definitely a consideration, Commissioner, but there are ways around it. You can make them flexible so that you can later in the future, based on the availability of different kinds of alternative fuels, use those gas-fired generation plants with other fuels, for example, hydrogen or renewable gas. Or you could just pace the addition of those resources into your system over time, separate over time, so that you don't commit to big capacity additions initially, but you do them as needed in smaller increments. That also reduces the risk.
When we're talking about risk, of course, one of the things that's on everybody's mind right now is the costs of natural gas and how it's increased exponentially just in the last year. I think I read maybe it was up 180% just in the past year. Does your modeling take into account how pricing of that fuel source and plays out in the long term as it impacts rates for ratepayers?
Yes, it definitely does. Although I should caution that nobody has the crystal ball to find out what is really going to happen to gas prices 20 years from now or 10 years from now even. So for that, we usually work on this by looking at the current market forecast, of course, including the forwards, and then develop some ranges, reasonable ranges for what the gas prices may look like, and consider consistent also ranges for other fuels like coal, when the gas prices are high, our coal prices also they're going to be high. And similar things about technology costs, etc. All needs to be done within a consistent scenario setting, and we evaluate the robustness of the proposed resource portfolio to that uncertainty essentially.
Yeah, I think if I could add to that real briefly, part of what we would do is sensitivity analyses there. So if the proposed resource portfolio does well under one gas price assumption, and then it also does really well under a different one, then that can give us confidence that we're making the right choice regardless of how things move. And I think part of it is going to be, how much risk averse does the utility want to be? There's always some possibility of overreacting in a situation like we're in today where gas prices are really high, but the last 10 years prior to this year, things have been really, really low on the gas market. So we want to make sure we're not, kind of making a knee-jerk reaction to where the market is today that we will be regretful of down the road. So sensitivity analysis kind of helps us flush that out.
Very good. And so that's really an important part of the modeling, is it not, when you're trying to look out over several decades and talk about generation planning?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. The assumptions on all things related to, like Metin said, technology costs, fuel costs, access to gas, transmission system, all those things are ripe for different types of sensitivity analysis.
I know that Santee Cooper has some coal-fired facilities, and I think they've already announced publicly that they're contemplating retiring some, if not all, of those coal-fired facilities. I'm wondering what your thought is about coal retirements. Are you seeing that it's kind of a widespread trend, and should we be more cautious given the other factors like the price of natural gas and its availability? Would you speak to that point just for a minute?
Sure thing. I have been working on that topic, coal plant retirements, for more than 10 years now. And it is definitely a trend in the industry to accelerate the retirement of coal plants before the end of their useful economic life, based on what we are seeing with respect to the competing fuels like natural gas prices, as John mentioned, the access to low-cost renewables and battery, etc. But you can do too much of a good thing in a way, like retire everything at once, and then you will be at a bottleneck situation with respect to maintaining reliability. So it really needs to be done in an orderly fashion, and each plant is different. Each plant circumstances are different, both with respect to their plant cost, age, required maintenance and repair expenditure going forward, compliance with the regulations, environmental regulations. So it has to be evaluated on a plant by plant and portfolio basis. But I think one of the things that caught my eye in looking at the IRP is, in addition to the alternative resource portfolios, considering the Vinya coal plant retirements later this decade, we need to look into what Santee Cooper is doing with respect to Cross, whether it will be part of the evaluation for potential early retirement, maybe around 2030, depending on the availability of other types of generation resources to replace it. So that's something I really want to focus on.
There's another interesting issue that's come up recently, and that is the fact that, as you may know, the legislature, in deciding to retain Santee Cooper as a state asset, set some limits on their ability to raise rates. I believe they're unable to raise rates until there can be no rate increases until after 2024. Is that your understanding?
My understanding, I may have missed that, but my understanding was part of the settlement in the litigation was putting those freezes. It
Right.
might also have been part of the
Yeah,
legislative.
you're right.
But
That
yes,
was part of the litigation
Right.
settlement, I believe.
Yes,
that,
yes.
Resulted.
Yes.
And you know, I know the ratepayers appreciate that, but it has limited Santee Cooper's flexibility, so to speak, in the short term. I understand they're going to before the bond review committee here in South Carolina soon to try and raise additional funds through bonds. But nonetheless, you know, that's going to be further complicated by the fact that their credit ratings have been affected by the fact that they're constrained at this point in time to raise capital. Would that in any way affect the short-term integrated resource planning process to kind of look at the financial side of Santee Cooper and see what's their capacity going to be in the short term to build new facilities?
It definitely would, Commissioner, because access to capital to raise funds for new generation assets, etc., is part of the consideration in deciding the near-term steps for transforming the fleet. It could be a mix of low capex options versus some options involving additional capex, but with a lot of cost advantage. So that really needs to be part of the consideration.
And another issue that's out there is that Santee Cooper apparently has millions of dollars in storm damage. And we recently have in South Carolina, the legislature has passed and the governor signed a securitization process for storm damage. Is that something that we could look at in an integrated resource plan to perhaps take some pressure off of their financials going in the short term to consider maybe a recommendation that they look at securitization for that storm damage bill that's still outstanding?
It is a partly economic, partly political question in my mind, but on the economic side of it, we will be happy to work with the commission and the staff to identify the cost imposed by not having access to capital or let's say not securitizing. And if then we can inform that decision by saying by securitizing you are reducing cost by X $million, for example, that I think would help.
It could actually benefit the ratepayers, could it not, to do the securitization route if it's properly done? Would you agree that's something we might want to
It
look
has
at?
potential to reduce costs both near term and long term, definitely.
Gentlemen, thank you. You've been most informative, and I appreciate your taking the time to answer our
Thank you.
questions.
Great questions, and
Thank you.
really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Commissioners, further questions?
Madam Chair, this is Commissioner Thomas.
Commissioner Thomas, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I just have a few questions. So you would be our independent outside consultants, and the way things work in South Carolina, you would not be able to communicate with us as commissioners, and you would not be able to communicate with our staff. So you would truly be working on this project on your own, so to speak. And were you aware of that?
Can I go ahead, John?
No, go ahead, Minton.
Okay. I wasn't aware of that strict requirement of not communicating at all, but I understand there will be rules on communicating with the commissioners. And actually, we were hoping to communicate quite frequently with the staff to inform the tasks and inform the findings from our analysis, but maybe I missed it.
Yeah, I mean, if the rules are such that we cannot do that, then we won't do it. I mean, we would conduct it independently and you know, communicate only in public forums like this or whatever is allowed, basically.
Okay. And I'm not an attorney, but that's my understanding. And so I would just suggest that you keep that in mind and perhaps talk with your attorneys. The other part of this whole scenario is that you would be rendering your independent report to us, and then there would be a hearing where you all would basically, I guess, present your report, answer questions, and defend your report. And again, my understanding is that during that hearing, you would not have legal representation. And again, that's my understanding of the way things work in South Carolina. And just was wondering if you're aware of that and prepared to testify without legal representation.
So definitely, we can testify with our own means, our independent views.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you. That is all I had.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Thomas. Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have one final question. As I've been able to sit here and listen and look at your presentation, if you are able to look at page 14 of your submittal, you talk about key personnel, and I think in your presentation to other commissioners, it's clear you two are that you are the project co-leads. But would you talk about the IRP technical advisors and the market model design technical advisors, and just talk about how you anticipate using them?
Yeah, I could take a first pass at that. I think so. Basically, I mean, part of what is, you know, nice about Brattle is that by hiring us, you get access to the whole firm and the whole electricity practice. And everybody we have in the proposal there has some, you know, expertise that we would find helpful. Even though they're not part of the kind of core project team, I think we would draw on their expertise when necessary to help with inform our modeling or our assumptions. So to give you an example, we have listed in there Ryan Ledick, who is a principal at Brattle in our San Francisco office, and he's, you know, one of the leading experts in the industry on battery storage. So to answer the question about battery storage from the previous commissioner, when we look at Santee Cooper's assumptions on how they, you know, treat battery storage in their IRP process, we would definitely want to run that by Ryan. He's worked on IRP processes where battery storage is a key part of the resource mix, and so we would want to get his input on that and have him help us understand if it's being treated the right way or how we would recommend changes. And everybody we have listed there brings some expertise like that to the table. Does that answer your question?
It does, but I'll try to paraphrase and see if I got it. It really will depend on the IRP that Santee Cooper presents to us, and it will be more of a from an expert need to gain expertise within your own house based on that submittal. Is that a fair summary of what you said?
That's right. Yeah, I think that's a good summary. Is that we would draw on our colleagues' expertise as needed is the way I would think about it. So if there are, and I think for sure there are certain things that will come up that we'll want to talk to people about, but if it really would be as an as needed basis.
Okay, and not any that are particularly anticipated that are on this list.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much. No further questions, Chair Belzer.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Gentlemen, thank you for your attention and patience with our questions this morning. I would note that pursuant to the schedule that's listed in the docket, it was a directive order dated July 28th, 2022, that a final conflicts check letter is due by Friday, 3 p.m. on Friday, September 2nd. So that's this coming Friday at 3 p.m. If you could provide us with a final conflicts check letter. Was there any other information that was requested to be provided by Friday? I don't think there was. So just be aware of that date and time if you would.
And we appreciate that. Thank you.
And if there's nothing, and that can be located on the DMS, the document management system on the PSC's website from that date. What was it, January 28th, I think. If there's nothing further, thank you for your attention and your willingness to submit a bid and respond to our questions. And we'll close this interview. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.